Shravana, you've made us live now?
Yes, Archana, we are live. You can start now.
Okay. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the fifth webinar of the series called Ask the Expert of Ascent webinar that we started about 5 weeks back. Our ratings for the last webinars have been average 4.4 out of 5, which gives us a lot of confidence in the content and the speakers that we are getting for you. All the content and all the topics are based on your requirement that you have filled up in the survey that we launched about 4 weeks back during when the COVID started. Again, these are different times and the different ways of bringing knowledge gurus and experts, domain experts to you. They've always been face-to-face sessions, but it's a different way of doing business for us as well. Today's session is dedicated to understanding taxation, especially post-COVID, because we are all at that time where we want to understand taxation. It's my privilege to introduce both our panelists today. A huge welcome to Vivek Karve, the Chief Financial Officer of Marico Limited. He has more than 19 years of experience in finance, banking, and IT across different organizations, which include Marico, Siemens, ICICI, and PNG. Vivek's current role as a CFO of Marico covers corporate finance, business finance, and commercials for Marico Group. And Vivek joined Marico in 2000 as a manager in corporate finance. Also, along with him is Anil Talreja, a partner with Deloitte India, and leads the consumer sectors for Deloitte in India. He's part of M&A Tax Group and has over 20 years of experience in handling matters pertaining to Indian tax and regulatory. Anil has been working very closely with senior executives of large consumer companies on various initiatives in the consumer sector pertaining to brand and IP, GST, HR, FDI, amongst others. A huge welcome to both of you, Vivek and Anil.
Thank you. Thank you, Archana.
What we would like to do is dedicate the next 15-20 minutes on establishing this as a conversation, and then we open out to Q&A immediately. You have two options. You have options to put in your questions in the Q&A section or raise a hand to ask an audio question. Once you raise your hand, Shravana from Ascent team will enable it and you can ask your audio question directly to either one of the panelists. We also have Naresh Somani, who is the taxation head for Marico, who we will bring in to answer the questions. Right now, I hand it over to Vivek and Anil to take the conversation forward. Over to both of
you. So Anil, would you like to kickstart and then I take on?
Yeah, sure. I can do that. Thank you very much, Archana, the Ascent Group, Shravana, and special thanks to Vivek and Naresh, my friends, who are going to help me out together to solve this complicated tax puzzle. And good evening, friends. It's a pleasure to be back here. I know the last time we were more face-to-face, but discussing tax using a virtual or digital sort of platform is going to be a challenge, but let us try and see if we can get to some level of simplicity out of this. So I think what I'd like to do is just share some of our initial thoughts on what is it that we need to keep in mind insofar as tax is concerned, with specific reference to the MSMEs, as well as, more importantly, the COVID crisis. 2-3 important messages that I get from a lot of interactions that I've done with some companies, which are interesting learning. The first, I think, important aspect is with regard to the government being very proactive. So full marks to the government to react to the situation quickly, because time is key over here. And as you know, the government has come up with a bunch of relaxations, exemptions, and benefits to companies at large in order to sort of get to a situation that companies don't suffer. They have recognized the pain that the companies will go through. That's one part of it. And we'll discuss that a little bit more in detail as to what the government has done with regard to tax. I think the other element which is very important is, as all of you know, it'll be at least about 1.5 or 2 years from today that you will be sitting across the tax officer and trying to explain a particular claim that you have made as a result of the loss that you've suffered uh, given the COVID crisis today. So when you're sitting now in March 2020, April 2020, by the time your assessment of your company happens, as you know, it'll be at least about 2 years. And that is the point of time if the officer has to give you the benefit of an allowance or a claim or a deduction that you have made, he's going to ask you, please prove that this was, really a case of loss. Is it a legitimate case? And then you'll have to scramble back and look at what was the situation. So now coming back to reality as we are today, I think most of you know that in the tax world, the mantra is document to defend. And that's I always call this to be the golden rule. You have to document enough in order for you to make a defensive strategy in the future. And today is the time, because we are actually experiencing this today. 2 years from today, you will not even remember what was the situation because you will get busy in your routine. So if supposing, let's take an example, you're looking at a capex plan, and there was some expenditure for capex that you were anyway incurring. But because of COVID, now that's gone into cold storage. And for some reason, you have decided not to pursue this project. And it is going to be a loss for you, not only on the expense that you have already incurred, but also maybe loss of profits. So if you have to justify this claim, in the future to the tax authorities, today you need to exchange emails with your third-party service provider that, look, I'm not in the position to meet this particular capex claim, or I am not in a position to carry this forward because I will have to do additional borrowing, and today's time it is not justifiable. And then you get an email back in reply saying, we agree that it is difficult time, so let's scrap. So that sort of a communication documentation, if we are able to get today, because it's all legit, we're not doing anything wrong. If it is a fact, it is a fact. That will be extremely essential for you to look at how you're going to lodge a claim into the future. Now, I think what is important is all of us are so busy in ensuring that our business don't suffer, and to ensure that our customers are connected with. There's a very good possibility we may lose sight of doing this documentation. You may just say, look, let me pick up the phone, speak to the supplier, and get him to sort of agree to, or not agree to a particular position, and that will help me to lodge a claim. But the fact of the matter is that we may miss out on documenting this in today's times. So all that I'm trying to say is document to defend is an important mantra that we need to keep in mind. I think one more final point before I pause and request Vivek to sort of add on to his thoughts is on the consumer segment. I think what I've noticed is it's one of the most impacted segment. Although we know the essential goods have been allowed, but all of us will agree that supply chains have been completely disrupted. And as a result of this, people have gone scrambling to get the supply chains back into place in some broken form or fashion. There are companies who are actually in a position to manufacture goods because they've got approvals, because they do essential manufacturing, but they do not have any takers. They do not have their transport facility, which is coming to pick up the goods. So as a result of that, what is happening is that the stocks are lying ready, but nobody to pick up. So they're reaching out to their super distributors and say, hey guys, you send your trucks and pick that up. So that is certainly going to cause some disruption in the supply chain. We also know that companies have started, or retail stores have started renegotiating or requesting landlords to waive the rents or to give a moratorium on the rents, or even to agree to a revenue model as opposed to a fixed cost model. Now, in that situation, whilst, as a retailer, you may agree with the landlord that this is what I will do, but is there an accounting or a tax implication out of this? We know that as per Ind AS 116, there is accounting for leases. Incidentally, IFRS has come out with a paper on lease with regard to the COVID crisis. The Indian regulator has to still come out with a document. So what is important is how are you going to account for this? Is it going to hit your P&L or not? And tax will, consequently follow. So these are ancillaries which one has to keep in mind before one just goes ahead and makes a projection as to what is going to be the revenue gain or the revenue loss in the future. So there's a lot that one can discuss, but maybe let me pause here, and I'm going to request Vivek to share his thought on the basis of his experience.
Shravana, can you unmute Vivek? Yes.
Yeah. Am I audible to all?
Yes.
Okay. So good evening, friends. I hope all of you are safe, healthy. I don't have to presume I know all of you are at home and like me are working probably harder from home, because that's been my experience. In fact, today we celebrate, I don't know whether I should call it celebrate 1 month anniversary of lockdown in Mumbai at least. So we complete 30 days in Mumbai. So yeah, these are trying times. And before I talk about taxation, because the matters of taxation would typically revolve around litigation and would also revolve around cash flows. So before we talk about the intricacies of the taxation complications, what we have been doing in Marico is something that I would like to share with you all. And probably it has some implication on the taxation matters also later. To me, the crux of the problem solution today is in conserving cash and doing a very aggressive cost management. Because if we are unable to do that, I think it's going to hit our current year profitability and probably our future growth models as well. So which is, I would say, nothing to do with taxation, but something which is on top of our agenda today. So I thought, because I have an opportunity to talk to 100 odd people, entrepreneurs like you, let me at least put forth that point of view in front of you. In addition to what Anil talked about, which is around documentation, I feel the tax compliance is going to be very critical in days to come. And see, typically we work in an office environment where we all are physically together. There are enough avenues for us to keep a complete track of all the compliances. But when all the employees in a company, they work from home in a virtual world, I would suggest that you should devise ways and means or systems to ensure that all the tax compliances and other compliances are met with. Because if you don't track these compliances on time, there is probably some benefit somewhere that you may either lose, or some penalty or some interest that may hit you. So to me, it is very critical. In very large companies, probably there are institutionalized ways and means of tracking compliances. But for some of you who are yet not very large, but are large enough to worry about compliances, I would encourage all of you to put in systems around virtual tracking of the compliance matrices. In addition to documentation requirements vis-a-vis our negotiations with customers, negotiations with our suppliers, I would also suggest that you give some attention to the transfer pricing norms also. Because what's likely to happen in this period is, especially with your related parties, whether they are domestic related parties or overseas related parties, there could be some renegotiation of the arm's length transactions which you may have entered into in the past. And commercial propriety will determine the renegotiation of all these matters. For example, let us say there is an overseas subsidiary that you have, and because of the cash flow issues, it has asked for an interest moratorium, or it has asked for delay or rather increasing the receivables that it has to you, or it has asked for an advance payment from you. And it could be with the domestic subsidiary also. So what matters for the tax guys is whether this moratorium or this waiver was triggered by commercial considerations or not. So somewhere we will have to prove to the taxman that it is the commercial consideration which has motivated a change or revision in the arm's length prices or the arm's length transaction with my related parties. So this is something that you need to keep in mind for those of you who have subsidiaries or who themselves are subsidiaries of any other holding company. So these are some of my initial thoughts. I would now request and hand it over to Archana to now moderate the session going forward.
Right. So we do have some questions which have already come up. Let me just take it. This is a question from Gauri Devi Dayal, which says that how is income tax tracking payments received in wallets like Paytm? Usually they ask for copies of bank statements when it comes to assessments. Vivek, you want to take that?
See, unfortunately for us, we do not have any payments that we receive in Paytm. So
okay.
It is either a check payment that we collect through CMS or it is RTGS or NSCH payment. Right. But probably what we can do for some of these questions where we may not have direct answers today, I suggest that we take them down and we will do our research with the help of our own internal tax team. Right. And definitely try and get back to you.
Okay. Okay.
If I may react to that, sorry,
right.
If you don't mind, maybe I have some perspective there. So maybe if I can try and react to that question. I think it's very similar to a credit card. When payments are made using a credit card, it's like one card, and then you have your credit card statement, and that has a list of payments. It's very similar. It's not identical, but the way the income tax department tracks the credit card payments, it is the same way that it tracks Paytm. Typically what it does, and I have had some experience, which is a little bit of a shocker, but here's the experience that I'd like to share. So there was a commissioner appeals that I had gone and I was appearing, and there was I think some credit card expenses, etc., which were being incurred, and he was trying to inquire about it, and we were trying to explain, and suddenly this commissioner opens his drawer and he removes one paper and he says, "This is your credit card statement which I have obtained from the credit card company." So as you know, the income tax department has got superpowers of approaching any company, and the companies are under an obligation to share. So that's how they will be in a position to track. I understand that there has been some conversations in the income tax department also to include this Paytm related expenses or even Google Pay, etc., as part of the disclosure requirements. So like you have these AIRs, the annual information reports. I think they will be capturing that as well as part of their overall sort of repository. So as a consumer, as a taxpayer, we may not really be required to do anything, but let's assume that they have the data either through these organizations or using their own database.
Sure. Thank you for answering that. At this point, I will encourage you to please start posting your questions in the Q&A, and we are opening it out for Q&A, where we'll pose these questions either to Vivek, Anil, or Naresh, and they'll answer that directly. Also, you can put, you can do the raise your hand icon, and you can ask an audio question to any of the three panelists directly. I'll still read out a few questions. Another question: while wages are the current priority, how does one prioritize payments between other expenses like vendors, utility bills, taxes, etc.?
So maybe I will take that question.
Yeah. Sure.
So during the COVID period, the government has come out with very, I would say, direct guidelines when it comes to payment of wages. So they are very clear in saying that you cannot A, retrench people, and two, you have to make whatever payments that are due to them. Okay. So I would say that I would always prioritize wages specifically to those people who are at minimum wages. Because if you don't do that, you will be, say there are two risks. risk number one is that you will be on the wrong side of the law, given the fact that government has specifically come out with these guidelines. And two, there is a significant reputation risk also. And the damage to the reputation in terms of the monetary implications is something is very hard to fathom, but it is better to avoid that particular risk. On the taxation, I would say we will deal with, because we have also received some of the questions in advance as to, can the companies delay the payment of taxes? Yes, you can delay the payment of taxes provided you are ready to bear the interest burden, wherein in which case you have to weigh your own cost of capital or cost of borrowing vis-a-vis the cost of interest. So that's a commercial call in my view, but the government has relaxed the due dates.
Okay. There is Nitin Ashar. I think he has an audio question. Shravana, can you enable that so that Nitin can ask one of the panelists directly an audio question?
Yes, Archana. Hi, Nitin. You can hear us?
Yeah. Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah. Good afternoon. I'm Nitin Ashar from Chennai. Mine is a B2B, and for companies whose turnover is above 50 crores, we are not supposed to accept cash payments for the billing done. Now, during this period, when the customers are spread across in interiors, will there be an exemption? Can we collect cash, or will it have some thing on the income tax, from the income tax angle? Will we face any problem in future?
Naresh, would you like to take that?
Yeah, sure, Vivek. So, hi Nitin, Naresh here. So, Nitin, as we are speaking, there are no per se relaxation which have been given with respect to that aspect in terms of receiving in the cash payment. So I'm not sure as to what would be the scenarios because of which this situation would arise, because of the fact that if we speak in terms of essential things perspective, then all the banking channels, be it in terms of RTGS, NEFT, and other things are functional. So purely from tax perspective, there are no relaxations which have been given in this regard, because otherwise also I don't think there would arise a situation wherein department would kind of give relaxation, especially with respect to cash, because we all know the kind of steps which the government has taken in terms of demon and to eradicate the entire black money scenarios. So from that perspective, as of now, there is no moratorium or there is no relaxation with respect to this. So to the extent possible, we should continue with the banking channels and receive the payments through them, through those channels.
Okay. Nitin, does that answer your question, or you have another question?
No, thank you. That's fine.
Thank you, Nitin. The next question is from Gayatri Vishwanathan. She's a Chennai member. We have a subsidiary in US and have a transfer pricing to India. I didn't fully understand the transfer pricing point that Vivek mentioned. Can you explain that a little further, Vivek?
Sure. So Gayatri, thanks for asking the question. What I meant is, see, typically what happens, there is a transfer pricing agreement between the two companies. And depending on whether it's a public company or a private company, the audit committee of the company has to approve the arrangement between the two parties at arm's length and also in the ordinary course of business. And these transfer pricing transactions, the related party transactions, are also then certified by our transfer pricing auditors. What I wanted to say is, during this crisis period, there is a possibility that companies may want to revisit the pricing formula in these related party transactions. So the justification for a revision in the pricing formula has to be commercially led, and if it can be justified based on commercial prudence, then I don't see a risk from any litigation point of view. However, if it is done very arbitrarily without enough documentation, I see a possibility of a litigation. So that is what I wanted to warn each one of you.
Okay. Next question. What if we have been given the installment of the tax payment from the department, whether we'll get moratorium period for that also?
Naresh, you want to take this?
Yeah.
Naresh, you want me to repeat the question? Shravana, can you unmute Naresh, please? Yeah. Naresh, I'll repeat the question. What if we have been given the installment of the tax payment from the department, whether they will be given moratorium period for that also?
So purely from income tax perspective, if we see the kind of relaxations which have been given under the income tax law is that whatever compliances which are due between the period 20th March to 29th of June, the payment can be made up to 30th June. However, having said that, what they have done is they have reduced the interest rate. So under the income tax income tax law, if you make the payment beyond the stipulated time period, there is a 1% per month interest which is being levied. However, over here, considering the current scenario, the relaxation which has been given is that instead of 1%, that interest rate would come down to 0.75%. In terms of kind of deferring the installment, though the recent notification talks about the compliances, so probably the best thing to do is approach the relevant authorities and ask them to extend the period of that installment. The only thing to weigh over here is that there would be interest implication. Probably they might cover it under this relaxation and charge you interest at 0.75%.
Okay. Next question is from Anita. Due to lockdown, it was not possible to conduct stock audit. So which stock to take as on 31st March? I'm not sure the question is complete, but
no, I will take that. It's a question that not just you, Anita, but all of us are grappling with. So we are in the same boat. So please don't feel sad about it. So all of us are in the same boat. So there are two approaches that we are trying to follow. Approach number one is a past to forward approach, and the other approach is today to past approach. I'll explain both. So let us say that the auditors, as part of their interim audits, have done stock take in a few locations. So what can be done then for these locations? There can be a complete mapping based on the physical records. This is again provided that particular stock point, whether it is a depot or a factory, is physically accessible today. So from that particular point when the stock take was last done till 31st of March, a complete mapping can be done, and then that derived stock can then be tallied with whatever has been accounted for in the books of accounts. So that is method number one. Method number two is to use the digital technology and do the stock take today. So we are trying to attempt that in some of our locations, where either with the use of Zoom or with the use of Microsoft Teams software, which is video enabled, we will actually carry out the stock take, say as on say 21st of April, and then based on the physical records that are available in the factory or the depot, we will trace back the stock availability as on 31st of March, and then compare that with the stock as has been recorded and shown in our books of accounts trial balance as of 31st of March. So this is going to give auditors a comfort that the stock as shown as of 31st of March is true and correct. Because as per the auditing standards, stock verification is one of the important audit procedures that the auditors have to perform. So they are not going to relax these norms, but we need to facilitate them in a manner which gives them the required comfort.
Okay. The next question, maybe Anil, you can answer this from Pratham Gandhi. Is there any looming legal threat due to delay of payments beyond 45 days to MSME? Legal threat.
So, on the basis of the representations that have been made and the announcements that the government has made, at this point of time, the government has not made any relaxation with regard to payments to MSMEs. One of the reasons perhaps is the government does not want the MSMEs to further suffer, because anyway they don't have their business is affected, revenue streams have been damaged, and hence they do not want them to further suffer, and hence they have not amended or relaxed anything of that sort. So if we are not able to meet the 45-day period, there is certainly a risk. But if you ask me for legal threat, I think if you have justification reasonably solid to say that, look, these are the circumstances under which I can't make a payment. Like I have I know a company which still operates, using checkbooks. They do not use an online method. So again, they can't because the checkbook is in the office. So if you're able to justify, I think it will be a good case for you to withstand any legal threat. See, at this point of time, I may have to only say that I don't think people are thinking about, or people are worried about taking a legal action against each other. People are very understanding. In my example of landlords versus the tenants, I think it's not that they're reaching into a deadlock situation. People understand, and I think because it's a global phenomena, everybody is affected. That is the reason why I think both the parties will come to some sort of an amicable situation and a midpoint, so to say, in this scheme of things.
There is a follow-up question, Vivek, if you could answer of Anita's question, but asked by on stock audit, asked by Arun Kedia, which says that will book stocks be accepted in absence of physical stocks?
I guess not, because the auditing standards require the auditors to perform stock audits. Of course, they will always do sampling. So what can be influenced at the most is the samples they pick up, depending on which locations are open and which locations are not. But getting a sign-off from the auditors purely based on only the book stocks, I find it very unlikely. It also depends on the governance standards of the company and the governance standards that the auditors want to perform.
Okay. Next question, as we are allowed to take a moratorium period of 3 months for bank installment, whether bank has right to charge additional interest on that? Naresh?
So my understanding of this is limited, but I'll explain what I've understood. So let us say just before the moratorium began, there were 24 installments. So what the bank will do is it will shift the next 3 installments into 25, 26, 27 months. However, because the installment remains unpaid, the bank is going to charge interest on that unpaid amount. So while it will provide you the cash flow benefit so that you can pay later, I don't think the bank is not going to charge you interest. Bank will definitely going to charge you interest because the bank will not do it at a loss to itself. But it will provide you some cash relief for the time being.
Okay. Another question, can we use COVID as an opportunity to take assets/intangible write-offs and take the corresponding tax benefit within FY20 itself?
So if I can...
yeah, please.
No, go ahead, Vivek.
No, it's okay. You can.
So I think, first of all, I think if you have an intangible, you anyway get a 25% sort of depreciation under the income tax rules. So a write-off in some sense of the term is largely available over a period of 4 to 5 years. It's a written down value, but largely in that period, your asset literally loses its existence in the block of assets. But again, COVID is not an opportunity to make any claims of this type. But if obviously you have a situation where your intangible is impaired, your value of the brand is lost for some reason, say your factory is not able to operate, or your competitor is in a position to reach your customers in this period and you've not been able to, and when it opens up, you're like getting difficulty in getting your same customers. So if there is a valuation done to see that there is a reduction in the value of the intangible, then certainly you can, reduce the value in your books. For income tax purposes, we have to strictly follow the block concept. And as we all know, there are several rulings to justify that the existence of an individual asset is lost in a block. So to take an example, plant and machinery, I may buy a machine today and add it to my block, use it for 2 days, and the fourth day it just becomes permanently damaged and I may throw it. I'll still completely be correct in claiming depreciation on that part because it's already got merged into the block. So again, you do have 25%, and 25%, by the way, is a very high rate of depreciation, I must say, in today's times, because the government has reduced, depreciation rates over a period of time. But yes, if you have only one intangible and you really believe and you have a value to justify it's gone, then yeah, you should claim a write-off. That's the way I would say. But Vivek, you want to add something? Please?
Yeah, so in fact, I just wanted to request Naresh to comment here. My understanding is if we are writing off any intangible in the books of accounts, and if your company is paying tax as per the MAT calculations, you may stand to benefit.
Naresh, you want to add?
Yeah, probably because if the company is under MAT, then the concept that gets followed is whatever is the profitability which is as per books of accounts and which has been maintained as per the company law, then that profit gets considered for the purpose of MAT. So Vivek, to that extent, is right in mentioning that. Having said that, it is only about the implication on the MAT credit carry forward or the MAT utilization basis that.
Okay.
And just one quick point. The key point that Vivek mentioned over here is write-off. If you make a provision, then you will not get the benefit in your book profits. You will actually have to write it off. So you have to remember every golden word that Vivek said in this regard.
Right. Question from Kunal Jain. As we all know that the restaurant business has taken a big hit with COVID as they work on high fixed expenses. Question here is, restaurant owners don't get GST input credit. Do you all think government should think of giving the input credit benefit? If done, so can it revive restaurant business, and will the government take such a big hit on their part? Anil, you want to answer that?
Yeah, so I've had the benefit of speaking to some of the people who are connected with this industry as part of our consumer sort of initiative. Right. So this is one of the asks that the Restaurants Association has made to the government. We don't have anything in writing from them. We do anticipate the government will look at their case in a very lenient manner. See, the difference between a restaurant and a consumer or a retailer, at least in the essential goods, is that the restaurant business has been completely shut. And once it revives, it'll open. So it's like you shut the tap and you're going to open the tap. Whereas the essential goods business has continued with some speed breakers. So the way the government is looking at it, and maybe rightly so, the moment things open up and we are living in a normal day, whatever point of time, people will really flock to the restaurants back, and there will be some pent up in the demands that the restaurants will get. There will be some recovery that they will have on the first month or 2 months. It may take some more time for people to sort of disobey social distancing, and after a couple of months of opening up, people will back to the restaurants because they have a habit of doing it. So there will be recovery, and that's the point in time. But yes, if there is a cutoff period where the input credit is being lost or lapsed, then certainly the government should obviously do it. But at the moment, as I said, we don't have a detailed clarity. In fact, on GST, I may also mention that we have also made a representation directly as well as through chambers to also request the government to reconsider the GST rates on some products. And we've identified about a bunch of them. We are yet to hear back, but I'm sure the government will look at this in a very lenient manner.
Okay, so there is hope there. Next question is from Vinay. During the period of COVID, the companies are making various expenses towards welfare of the nearby villages of the plant location. Whether these expenses are allowed to be considered as CSR. Vivek, you want to answer that?
Yeah, sure. So there are two questions as I see. The income tax allowability of the spend and the eligibility of a spend as a CSR spend.
CSR, yeah.
Yeah. So see, the eligibility of a CSR spend is very clearly guided by Schedule 7. So if you believe that the spend that you are doing qualifies to be classified under Schedule 7 permissible activities, then it will definitely pass the muster. So just to give you a classic example, the PM Care Fund, any contribution that you make to a PM Care Fund is CSR. But if there is any Chief Minister Relief Fund, it is not CSR. So there are nuances that we need to be very, very conscious of while we make these contributions. However, let us say that it is for the expenditure that you are incurring is, say, for community development, or it is for education, it is for sanitation, or it is for, say, health. There are very good chances that it will qualify itself as a CSR expenditure. I'm unable to answer in more specificity because we need to really look at, because the process that we follow in Marico is whenever a user department wants to contribute any funds towards CSR, there is a CSR committee which is comprised of a few members inside the company who in turn report to our board of directors. They have a protocol in place to examine whether the proposed expenditure will fall under Schedule 7 or not. So if you don't have this process in place, depending on the size of your organization, you may want to institutionalize this process inside your company.
Okay. So why the difference between the Prime Minister's fund and the Chief Minister's fund? Both are government related.
Understand. Probably what they want to do is channelize all those monies for the Prime Minister COVID Relief Fund so that it gets spent centrally. Probably.
Probably. Okay. Next question is from Anand Kumar. As the business operations have been completely stopped, will the clients be made compulsory in paying out fixed payments like people cost, infrastructure cost as per the agreements to us, as we are bound to pay them the salaries and rent, etc.? Should I repeat the question? Hello? As the business operations have been completely... Oh, wow. Hello?
Yeah, please go ahead.
Ashna, we are able to hear you.
Yeah, okay. As the business operations have been completely stopped, will the clients be made compulsory in paying out fixed payments like people cost, infrastructure cost as per the agreements to us, as we are bound to pay them the salaries and rents, etc.?
So,
yeah, Vivek, go ahead.
Sorry, I suddenly logged off, so I did not hear your question at all.
Okay, so I don't know, Anil, would you want to take that, or something to do with fixed payments and paying people's cost and all that? Can Anil hear us?
Arsha, Naresh here.
Yes.
Yeah, Naresh, you can take that.
So probably this my view over that is this is something to do entirely with the commercial negotiation, and depending upon the commercial acumen and depending upon the liquidity crisis that one see, can accordingly negotiate with these kind of scenarios. Just to give you an example, there are negotiations which are currently going wherein if you have a rented premises, then people are actually approaching the landlords and asking them for the moratorium in terms of be it for 1 month, 2 months, or whatever period. But then it entirely depends upon those negotiations that we have.
Okay. There's a question from Kiran Kumar Singh. What is the date of TDS payment for Q4 2019-2020?
So the due date for Q4 as per the law, it is provision, it is 30th of April. However, having said that, there have been relaxation wherein government has said that any kind of compliances which are due between 20th March to 29th June, the payment of the same can be made by 30th of June. However, having said that, there is of course a interest implication which you will have to pay at the rate of 0.75% per month.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, Naresh. A question from Rahul Shah. While the GST Act permits refund of excess ITC on goods and services, the rules were later modified to exclude input on services. This had led to accumulation of ITC and increase of working capital deployed. Do you think the government will review this matter and provide for refund of surplus ITC on inputs of services as well? Vivek or Naresh?
Naresh will have to
Naresh.
take this. It's too technical for me.
Yeah,
Yeah, I'm just going through the question once again. Give me a moment.
Yeah.
So I think this is purely the government who will have to take a call on that. But just to refresh my memory, I believe that the inputs in relation to services are also eligible for the refund purpose. Because under the GST Act, there are two scenarios wherein you are allowed to take the refund. One, wherein your products are falling under the inverted duty structure, or in case of export of goods. So if you are if you're doing the export of goods, then whatever input tax credit that you have, you are eligible to take the refund of that. So I'm not sure. Probably I can come back on this in terms of whether there was this modification wherein there's no refund which is being allowed on input ITC on services.
But it sounds a little counterintuitive because GST is a value-added tax, and insofar as any goods or any service inputs are used for the purpose of business, there is no reason why government will deny the input tax credit.
Okay. Another question from Nitin. Certain products are exempted from GST like curd, but inputs like culture carry GST, which customers naturally will not get set off. Is it right time to approach the government to have such inputs exempted from GST now?
I believe that is exactly what Naresh was talking about, inverted duty structure, where there is tax on input, but there is no tax on output. And these are the cases where you can ask for a refund from the government.
Okay.
So yeah, there could be a case, especially if the time that government is taking to make the refund happen is excessively high.
Okay. Anil, you want to add
only to add on to this, probably considering the fact that the product is exempt altogether, there is a merit in terms of representing to the government in terms of exempting the inputs also. Because generally what happens if your product is kind of exempt, per se, it may not get into the category of filing for the refund, because it is exempt, and hence part of the law says that if your goods are exempt, then to that extent, whatever inputs are there, you will have to reverse those input tax credit. So I think there is a merit in terms of asking the government to kind of exempt the inputs also with respect to those products on which output is also exempted.
Okay. I'm not sure if this is a tax question, but either one of you can answer it. From Arun Kedia, is it a good time to make acquisitions in EU given the stress in their economy is expected to be severe?
It is. I'll try and take this, and then Anil can add. It's completely a function of, does it make economic sense for you to do that? Because just because an asset is a target is cheap, there is no necessarily a case that you have to acquire. But
Right.
if you believe that whatever business that you are buying in has a value which is undervalued, then probably there is definitely a case for you to acquire.
Okay. Anil, you want to
just
add to that?
I fully agree with Vivek. See, while the price may look a little attractive at this point in time, given what's happening in the European Union, but you have to remember that when you buy a company or an asset there, you're also taking over the liabilities. And remember, in these tough times, the liabilities could be high. There could be borrowings, there could be legal issues, etc. So you need to carry out a proper diligence in order for you to come to a conclusion that it is a comfortable asset for you to have. Otherwise, you may just be attracted by the price and miss out on the bigger point. And the other quick point I wanted to say, as you may have heard in the last weekend, there are a bunch of countries who have already announced restrictions in their FDI regimes. So India did that on Saturday, where India has said that foreign direct investments coming from neighboring countries will have to go through the government scanner before they make any acquisitions. Similarly, there are a bunch of other countries which have already put in regulations to say that if other countries are, acquiring companies in their country, then they will have to go through some of the approvals from those respective governments. So you may have to also look at that aspect before you take a decision.
Okay. There's a question from Krishna Prasad. If there is any GST dues of previous months pending to be paid as on 20th March, will it get the benefits of the extension?
So,
please carry on, Naresh.
Naresh, please.
So the understanding is that all those compliances which are falling between the dates of 20th March till 29th of June, and that also being staggered depending upon the turnover of the particular SSE. Only with respect to those due dates, the relaxation has been provided. So if you have anything which has been a liability which has already occurred and taken place in the past prior to 20th March, then the normal provisions would apply, and accordingly the same would be treated.
Okay.
But Naresh, the way I understood the question is more on account of carrying forward of input tax credit asset.
I thought one is referring to the fact that if, let's say, they have not paid the GST liability for the month of January, can they avail the relaxation and then pay it up to 30th June?
Yeah, the question is, if there's any GST dues of previous months pending to be paid as on 20th March, will it get benefits of the extension?
Okay. Then I think what Naresh has answered is right. Yeah, sorry.
That is correct, yeah. I'll take some questions which have come previously. Expenses incurred by the organization to control COVID, will it be tax deductible? They have not mentioned what kind of expenses, but any expenses incurred during this time, will it be tax deductible?
Yeah, a short answer is they will be.
Okay.
So probably the reason behind that is because these are the expenses which would be claimed under Section 37 of the Income Tax Act, and Section 37 says that if you are incurring any expense for the purpose of carrying out business, then all those expenses would be allowed. And considering the current scenario, these are the expenses which a particular firm or a company is will necessarily incur, from safety perspective, and in order to carry out their business, and hence the reason that it should be allowed as an expense.
Okay. The question from Syed: shall I carry over excess ITC of March to April month? Is it possible in current scenario?
So probably to answer that, it may not be it may not be straightforward to say that to carry forward the March ITC to April. However, there can be structured manner by way of which you can actually kind of try and defer the input tax credit to the next month. For example, depending upon the nature of transaction, if the time of supply can be kind of moved or shifted to the next month, then probably it merits that you kind of renegotiate and have that transaction take place in the next month. Having said that, for all those companies who already have and it merits for all those companies, especially where there is accumulation of input tax credit.
Okay. There's a question from Akash Verma. If a company doesn't have access online to their systems in the lockdown, if we have to make a delivery of an essential service, is it all right to make the invoice and pay bill once the offices open? It's a technical, tactful question.
I think if I'm not wrong, then there is no e-way bill requirement with respect to services. The e-way bill requirement is only with respect to goods. So partly to answer that from purely from e-way bill perspective, I don't think there is any kind of non-compliance from that perspective. However, in terms of services, though you may raise an invoice, but I'm not sure purely from time of supply perspective, why would one do that if the services have not been performed? Because neither the recipient would be agreeable in terms of making the payment unless and until the recipient receive the services. So the objective of merely raising an invoice is something which I'm not able to understand.
Okay.
This scenario could be, Naresh, where the service was rendered in the past, the invoice was not raised in the system, and now they want to raise the service invoice in the system for accounting the income for the year 1920. That could be that scenario.
This is a tricky question. Can we claim home rent as expenses since we are working from home? That's a good question.
Unfortunately, the tax system in India works with explicit cost and not implicit cost. So, love and affection is not counted as a cost. So.
But it's not fair. I mean, it's a good question. Why can't we claim that as an expense?
No, I think the question is very valid, but I think that's the irony of the situation. A classic example here is that if it's a company provided car, the company can actually claim that expenditure as business expenses. Right. However, if an employee uses his own car, he cannot claim the fuel expenses as deductible from his salary income. Such nuances or such dichotomies do exist in the tax laws.
Yeah, let's not encourage that. Otherwise, your water bill and electricity bill will be going to the organization. So the next question is, if income tax refund for last year is pending, then how will that amount? How will get that amount on priority from government? Because at the time, amount of refund will help us create fund flow in our business.
So I think income tax department has already initiated the fast tracking of refunds below 5 lakh, below the amount of 5 lakh rupees. And going by the current news which has been there in the environment, I think department is on the move to fast track all other refunds as well, considering the liquidity crisis. So if at all the refund amount is below 5 lakhs, the best way to do is probably, since these are the days where department has also went online and communication has started over email also. So one should write and kind of file the refund online, write and reminder email to the respective jurisdictional office asking them to issue the refund, and keep pushing for that.
Okay. Question from Syed. Is there any relaxation of late fees and interest for the months previous to February 2020? How can that be calculated for further period from March to June 2020?
So if it is qua GST law, I think previous to Feb 2020 there is no waiver. However, having said that, all those compliances again which are falling between the dates 20th March to 29th of June, there have been various notifications which have been issued, and depending upon the threshold turnover threshold limits which have been specified, if your turnover is below 5 crores, then the government has waived the entire interest, penalty and late fees. And if your turnover is above 5 crores, then the late fees and interest, the late fees and the penalty are waived off. However, interest continue to be levied at 9% as against 12%. Okay. Sorry, as against 18%.
18%. A question from Sheetal. What about income tax refund above 5 lakhs?
So as I mentioned, as of now, there have been no guidance which have been issued by neither by Ministry of Finance nor by CBDTs, but it is under kind of evaluation, and probably probably considering the scenarios, they should come out with the guidelines to issue the refund above rupees 5 lakhs also.
5 lakhs also, okay. Vivek, you could answer this because pertaining to the car expenses also, there's an extra question. Akshat Lada says, pertaining to vehicle expenses, as a question was asked, but it's not related to COVID directly. Can a company claim expenses and depreciation on vehicle in personal name of the director of the company if the beneficial owner of the company, that is, company is paying the EMI of the car? Not a COVID question, but yeah, since you brought up the car thing.
Sure. So, if the agreement with the managing director, which is approved by the board of directors, is that the company will provide for the transportation of the managing director, and if towards that the company is paying the lease rentals or the company is paying the EMI, my guess is that it should be allowed. However, if the company is paying the EMI, I'm not able to understand why should the company not own the vehicle.
Yeah.
Because unless and until the ownership is with the company, the company won't get the depreciation benefit. I don't see any possibility of company getting any depreciation benefit. A company may get the interest benefit. However, if it is a leased vehicle, company can definitely claim the lease rentals as allowable expenses.
Okay. Anil, question is, what tax relaxations can we expect from the government this year? Do you have any directions for the participants on that?
You're asking Anil to almost
Anil.
read
Yeah.
the taxman's
Any
mind.
tax relaxations can we expect from the government this year?
Well, it's anybody's guess, but I just wanted to make a small comment, which is important. So I thought I'll just mention it. I think what the government has done is they have only come up with some measures of relaxation. But we have to recognize, and as rightly mentioned, and very rightly said by Naresh, the other provisions of the income tax law stay intact. They will operate exactly in the same way. So Section 37(1). If there is a capital expenditure, it will still not fall within 37(1). So we have to recognize that all the other provisions of the income tax law are intact, and there is no blanket exemption given to all companies because of COVID and we suffered and we had a loss, allow us some benefit. One classic example is, today's time, cash is king. People are actually having zero revenues and they want to incur expenses because salaries, rental, fixed costs. So they are pooling cash from various entities into one entity. Now, remember one thing, pulling cash from one entity to another entity is easy in terms of operations. You can do an online transfer. But please note that how are you going to account for this? Because you have something called deemed dividend in the Indian tax law, which is still not exempted. It is still a robust provision to say that if one subsidiary transfers a loan to another sister subsidiary, under certain circumstances, it could actually be taxable in the hands of the recipient. So all that I'm trying to say is that be very careful. Don't assume that there are lots and lots of exemptions given and everything will be bent forward and backwards because of COVID. The other provisions will have to be adopted in the full robustness. So that was a short point I wanted to make at this point.
Thank you. Can I, with your permission, extend the webinar for another 10 minutes because we have a few more questions and we are above our time. Is it okay if we extend the webinar for another 10 minutes?
Yeah, I'm okay to go till 18:15. So it's fine.
Okay. Okay. Question from Matthew Epen. Same problem of income tax refund we are also facing. We received IT refund order, more than 45 days amount, 6.7 crores, but department not releasing the amount. If any option to get the amount at the earliest. Naresh, you want to answer that question? How to get that amount?
Oh, probably means there's no clear-cut answer to that. But then, having said that, the only thing at this point in time, what we can do is to actually push the department left, right, center, and probably if it is not being heard at the first level, you may try and escalate it to the next level. Speak to additional commissioner or commissioner and try and make your position clearer. In the normal circumstances, the purely from technical perspective, the other way could have been to file a writ if the refund is very genuine and go before the High Court and ask for your refund. But in the current situation, I think from practicality perspective, that may not be feasible. However, having said that, it's all kind of, I would say, relations, because at the end of the day, relationship also plays an important role. So depending upon how the situation is, depending upon how kind of the reaction from the officers are, you can take the call accordingly.
Okay. There is an audio question from Nimish Rambia. Can we enable that, Shravana, the audio question, and he can direct it to one of the panelists?
Yes,
Nimish?
my question is, there are a lot of benefits that the government given in terms of they paying the provident funds of the employee. Now, whatever provident fund which the government pays, would that be taxed in the hand of the employees as perquisite? And does the employer take that as an income and deduct tax on that?
Okay. Vivek or Anil, one of you?
Yeah. So I'm just trying to understand the question. So my guess is like this, that see, today also an employer is contributing to the provident fund, either RPFC or the company managed provident fund, and to the extent it is within the limits, it is not taxable in the hands of the employee. So if instead of the employer, the government is footing that bill, I don't think why would it be taxable as a perquisite in the hand of the employee. However, what I'm not very sure about is there is a certain obligation which an employer has, which is now being met by the government. So to that extent, I don't think it will be allowed as an allowable expenditure in the books of accounts of the employer. But maybe Naresh can add.
Yeah.
Yeah, probably Vivek, just thinking aloud, since in first place the kind of the amount which is being transferred into employees account is not from the company, so I believe allowability of that particular expense in the company should not arise in first place, because company has not actually paid that particular amount.
Correct.
Nimish, that answers your question?
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Nimish. Question from Kaushal Kumar. Can we take full credit of unmatched invoice of GSTR 2A for the month of March 2020? Naresh?
Yeah, probably. So strictly speaking, going by the law, if we see section 16, only section 16 talks about that there are certain conditions which have been let down to avail the particular credit, and one of the condition is that the supplier of goods or services file the return and pay the taxes. Now, I'm not too sure as to what would be the reason behind the unmatched invoice. Having said that, probably the best way to go is if you have a valid invoice with you, and the due payment has been made along with GST to the supplier of goods or services, then my view would be that you go ahead and claim the credit. That should not be any issue.
Okay. I think we'll try to take just one last question. This is from Rahul Shah. What are the areas or points of fiscal stimulus being thought by the government? Any insight from the panelist? Anil, you want to take that?
Yeah, so look, I think it's again anybody's guess, but here's what I believe, in my personal view. The fiscal stimulus that the government will announce will all be catering with around the rural population, around the farmers, and around all those who are actually having very, very tough times and literally hand to mouth. So what the government did in the earlier announcement, as we know, they have a very smart move of giving, and I must commend the government again, of giving these cash benefits. So they use the various schemes, whether it's the Prime Minister's Kisan Yojana and all the others where people have enrolled, and even Manrega. And that's the channel that the government uses, because that also makes it contactless, faceless deposit of money. We don't want people scrambling and standing in queues for getting this particular cash benefit. So I believe that the announcement will largely be focused around the poor, the needy, the farmers. The good news is, as you know, that monsoon is going to be normal. So people are really looking forward to it. The economy will bounce back. We don't know when and how fast. So these are important parameters. The government has to give benefit to the agricultural sector, because that is the backbone of our economy. Now, they may also make other announcements like as I said, there are requests pending at the government level on rationalization of some GST rates. But again, that may or may not happen, or even if it happens, it'll be for a temporary period of time. But here again, I must say, even if they do that, we have to remember there is anti-profiteering, etc. So it's not that those provisions will be exempted. So one has to be very careful once the announcement is made. And if you are an essential goods businessman, then you'll have to keep that in mind as well. Okay. So these are big points where the government may make some announcements.
Okay. I think we're at 6:13, so we'll wind this up. Thank you so much, Anil, and thank you so much, Vivek. Thank you, Naresh, for being part of this. To the participants, we'll be sending you a link to please give feedback about the webinar. Your feedbacks enables us to work on the content and get you the right expert. Thank you so much for all three of you for your time.